Welcome back. The Romans could only think of one way of dealing with the Scots. They built a wall and kept them on the other side. Hadrian's Wall might have crumbled years ago, but the barriers still remain between those from the north and south of the border. If anything, relations are now getting worse. Kate Copstick, what is it with the Scots? They're always whinging, they're always moaning, they're always saying how wonderful their own country is. If their own country is so wonderful, why are they down here taking our jobs?
Well, there's really not a lot else that you would want. The warmth and friendliness of the people or the quality of life in general. So
but you Scots mythologising are pathetic about, you know, through Mel Gibson. You Scots, listen, I'm impartial here. You Scots mythologising about Mel Gibson and all that Braveheart nonsense. Battles 700 years ago. Get a life.
We are trying very hard.
I'm doing my best, all right?
We had a great life until the English came in and knackered it all.
Oh yeah, the English, and subsidised you with English taxpayers' money for years and years and years. They have kept you floating.
Off the shore of which country was it they found all that oil? No, Scotland.
No, Britain. Actually, Britain, actually. Yeah, Scots, the most well-balanced nation on earth. Chip on both shoulders.
Yeah, well, the English fried them.
We shouldn't be talking about. We shouldn't be talking about Scotland distancing himself from England. We should be talking about England distancing themselves from Scotland.
You little Englander.
Because
you little Englander.
I am a big British guy.
Hang on.
I am getting fed up with, as an Englishman, taking grief off not just the Scots, the Welsh as well. Because they hate us. Why? we don't dislike them.
And you're so lovable. Listen, no, wait. Hang on. How would you characterise the Scottish personality?
The average Scottish person is very nice, I have to say. But they're it's hardcore who are the most whinging, miserable, what I can only disturb as bastards.
Oi.
It's true.
Hand out. Old-fashioned Scottish discipline. Whoa.
So you missed that as well. Penalties and
It was like that Gary McAllister penalty in Euro 96.
But it's true. They are always moaning about the English. Why?
Well, I'll tell you why they're moaning about the English, because we've had repression from the English since Edward I and his bloody repression, and Margaret the Last and her poll tax.
Yeah, that was a long time. Our poll tax as well, remember?
Oh, they tried it in Scotland first, thank you, Brimson.
Well.
Let's speak to a politician. You two evidently are not politicians. Alex Neil from the Scottish National Party. Thanks for being here. Serious points here. There are increasing reports of anti-English incidents and feeling in Scotland. This must worry you.
Yes, that does worry us. I mean, the SNP is very, very hard on any kind of anti-Englishism, if it's in the form of racism. Football banter's one thing.
Why then did you hand out leaflets outside the cinemas where Braveheart was showing, saying brave hearts and brave minds? You condemn it, but you're quite happy to tap into it if it means votes, aren't you?
No, not at all. It was a challenge to the Scottish people, actually, not to stop the whinging about England, blaming England for our problems. Scottish people have nobody to blame.
Have you seen Braveheart? Do you know how many English people get garroted in that particular film?
Absolutely, absolutely. And
you can't have it both ways, Alex.
A lot of that was based on a true story. I would give England their independence tomorrow. I think England deserve their independence from Scotland. We have subsidised... Hang
on, I'll be over in a minute. I like the sound of you. I'll be with you in a minute. Carry on.
We've subsidised England with the oil money during the 80s, and when you look at Scotland, we've got some of the worst poverty, worst housing and all the rest of it in the whole of Europe. Now, we don't want to see that happening in England. When the oil money was flowing, we were prepared to share it.
Nationalism, that is the banner that you are flying, the banner of nationalism. Now, when it gets extreme, there are extremists.
Of course there are.
Look at Serbia, look what can happen.
Every ism has an extreme element in it, but what we are saying is you could be Scottish with a capital S and nationalist with a small n. Being for Scotland doesn't mean that you're against England, and certainly
what about Britain? Why not celebrate Britain? Why not celebrate the history? They put the great into Britain. Why not, you know, the Scottish? Remember, it was the Germans who called the Scots troops the devils in skirts. Remember the Thin Red Line? Remember the civil engineers, the missionaries who staffed the British Empire? Together, England and Scotland, great together. What's wrong with that?
Well, I'll tell you what's wrong with it. I'll give you an example. We had 18 years of Thatcherite rule, despite the fact we never, ever voted for Thatcher. And yet we had to suffer as a result of an English political decision. And now we have a right-wing Labour Party that's moved to the right because of what's happening in England despite the fact that the political
Robin
values in
Cook,
Scotland are
George
to the left.
Robertson,
Yeah,
need I go on?
right-wingers,
There's about 13
right-wingers.
of them,
They
13
have now gone
Scots
to
in the government.
They've now gone to the right of the Tories.
They're
in some
Scottish,
issues.
though.
No, well, they won't be Scottish MPs after the next election. but
Pinky
this performance-
Braithwaite, you were interjecting a few minutes ago. The Scots have given great things to society. The television, that very thing on which we are at the moment. Thank you very much, John Logie Baird. The telephone, the roads, the list goes on.
Yeah,
Malt whiskey.
Yeah, but the Irish do good whiskey as well, so it's not entirely the problem.
What do you say to our friend from the Scottish National Party?
Oh, well, he's a very engaging chap. I mean, I mean, I wouldn't want to fall out with him personally, but I mean, it's a bit like the sort of relationship between a parent and a wayward child. You know, okay, you've grown up, you've done your O-levels. We'll cut a big trench, float Scotland off towards Norway. Bye then. Take your oil. See you later. We'll be English now.
Kate Copstick, do you sometimes find the English a little bit patronising?
The English have, as a generalisation, which I'm more than happy to make, they have an innate and totally misplaced sense of superiority.
I beg, misplaced. How exactly misplaced? I mean, we motored the Industrial Revolution. We created the. Sorry, dear. I was on a roll there.
With your figure, that must be fun.
Do you speak English?
I am speaking English.
Dave Small from the Birmingham City fanzine. One of the. I bet Kate Copstick. I bet you are one of these people who cheers when England lose at football. I bet she is one of those people.
We're talking
Dave Small
order.
from the Birmingham City fanzine. What do you think about people like that?
I think they're idiots. But I've been cheering for years when Scotland lose.
Yeah?
You know,
I'm idiots.
I can give as good as I take. If they boo England, I can boo Scotland. It's a double-edged sword, isn't it? But I
Who do you support?
Do you know, Nicky?
Yeah, but when England are playing. Whoever's
Whoever's
playing England?
Exactly.
Well, who,
yeah.
Argentina?
Yes.
Even though we were at
that was
war
the
with them a few years ago?
biggest roar in a Scottish pub I've ever heard when Paul Ince missed that penalty because he epitomises arrogance.
Good man.
Why?
Oh, he's just arrogant. He just is. I mean, basically, I don't hate the English. A lot of Scots don't, but at the end of the day, Scots don't like Southern English people because they tend to be very patronising.
Dougie Brimson, what do you make of attitudes like that?
Is it any wonder that the English have a problem with the Scots when, they don't support us at all? I mean, when Scotland are playing, everyone says, well, we should want the Scottish to win, and most of us do. I personally don't.
Hey, Mickey.
But it's true. But the Scots, they want us beaten at everything. And unfortunately, they're usually disappointed.
We've always had the opinion
Yeah.
that England are the neighbours from hell.
Yes, funny, we are.
Philip, you're a historian. Philip, you're a historian. I think we need to put this into some historical context. You're a historian. 700 years of being under the English boot. Subjugation. We have been an oppressed nation, and it's a classic symptom of a two-nation relationship where one is weaker but perhaps full of more talented people.
No, I'm afraid this is just, funny enough, the Scottish lack of self-confidence is actually almost a historical construction of the English. In the early 19th century, when, after, yes, years of the English beating the Scots regularly in battle, and by the way, don't forget that, not then, are you?
No, not football in the 19th century and 18th century.
But what the Scots obviously forget, by the way, is that their history stops at Bannockburn, and they conveniently forget that for every time the English invaded Scotland...
No, it was Wembley 67.
No. When the Scots... They forget when the Scots invaded England, when David II invaded England and got stuffed at Neville's Cross by good old Edward III, when the Scots invaded under James IV and got stuffed at Flodden. And what's interesting is that after years of, yes, being oppressed possibly by the English...
we've had a goalkeeper problem over the years.
However, in the early 19th century, good old Sir Walter Scott produced this lovely romantic view of the English... of the Scots.
Yeah, Sir Walter Scott. We haven't... Go on.
No, I was just wondering if he brought his underwrite. You seem to know a lot.
Do you know what? One awful moment I thought we were going to get an intelligent comment about Sir Walter Scott. Was your boy done it right then? Yeah, over there. Yeah, over there. Go on.
If I wanted a history lesson, I would have gone to school. You know what I mean?
If you listen to what I've
to bring my phone, I would have taken notes. I would have, really. You know.
That's the problem. One of
The thing is, don't you acknowledge, though, that history is an absolutely vital thing to this, and it does go back. It's important for two nations that are so... Kate Copstick, history is important here.
History is totally important. I mean, I don't see how the English can expect us not to remember that they banned our language, they banned our music, they banned the kilt, possibly.
Was it any wonder after hearing that bloke earlier on?
But the irony is that in the early 19th century, the English reinvent Scottish romanticism, and the Scots swallow it. The Scots swallow this Sir Walter Scott created victim mentality and adopt it. So funnily enough, the two chips on the Scots shoulder have both made in England on the back of them.
Thank you, Ivanhoe. Thank you very much. Yeah, Katie.
It's a complete myth, this sort of Scot-English divide. I'm English, but my English ancestors raised the flag for Bonnie Prince Charlie, whereas my husband's family, who are Grants, they raised the flag for the Hanoverians.
What's it like for you? Let's get out of the realms of Time Watch just for 1 second. But what is it like for you, being an English person living in Scotland with two kids? And is there, because over the last few years, there's a received wisdom that the anti-English hostility has increased. Is that your experience?
Yes, it certainly is, and I think that the case studies prove it. Only last week there was a case in the newspaper where a boy was fined £200 in Kilmarnock Sheriff's Court for going to his neighbour and shouting English bastards at them and trying to get them out of their house. But these are small incidences which are not perhaps that important, but when you build them up into cases, they are important. My children come home from school aware that they're English.
Is it a manifestation of the current political drift in Scotland, do you think?
First of all, it is that. It's because the Constitution's in a bit of a turmoil.
People like you whipping it up, Alex Neil, it's an inevitable consequence of Scottish nationalism, isn't it?
Well, it
is, isn't it? What do you say to Alex Neil, then?
Well, I say that although I think the more sensible members of the SNP are very against...
We couldn't get them tonight, unfortunately. We can only get Alex Neil.
Thank you, Nicky.
I think that obviously that nationalism is driven, that Scottish nationalism is driven by anti-English rhetoric. So the less educated members of the Scottish public latch on to that. It's very easy to shout English bastard at somebody and less easy to enter into some sort of reasoned argument.
Yes, it's the feeling that you feed on, anti-English rhetoric, whether it's subtle or whether it's hidden, but it's there.
No, not at all. Our nationalism isn't based on an anti-Englishism. I mean, one word that hasn't appeared so far in this discussion is Europe. We are now all part of a bigger European Union. And what we are saying is that Scotland should play its part in Europe, and the relationship between Scotland and England should change from one of being maybe ill-tempered neighbours to being good neighbours. Instead of a crab at lodger, you would have a good neighbour.
Right, OK, before I'm going to move over there, because I think Philip's going to give a history lesson on Europe any second, so I'm just going to come over here. It goes the other way, though, the prejudice, doesn't it? Because what happened to you, James?
Yeah, well, I started a job. The foreman took me on, and the manager come back. He says, understand you're Scottish. I says, aye, that's right. He says, well, go and collect your wage packet. He says, yeah, I don't have time for you lot.
Just because you're Scottish?
Well, that's fair enough. I mean, just because I was Scottish. But at the end of the day, you can understand the English, because they got a bad look about us. I mean, they all think we go about with bandages on, they're eating string vests. You know, I mean, they all think they're Rabsy Nisbet, a bottle of wine on one side and a sandwich on the other. I mean, they think we're pricks, you know what I mean? And I can understand...
Well, whatever they think, I'd rather use such a strong language. You know, it's not quite late enough.
But you phone up an employer, and as soon as you hear the Scottish accent, they change their mind.
The only really, James, the only pricks I want to hear about are the ones on a thistle tonight, if you don't mind. We've got to take a short break. When we get back, we'll be hearing our ancient rivalry turned into racial violence. Join us in just a couple of wee minutes. Let's swing through the bonny purple heather to John Mason. John, you were at a concert, weren't you? What sort of concert did you go to?
I went to a Day for Scotland back in, I think it was 89, 90.
Yeah, and bands like Runrig were playing.
Runrig, yeah.
And it was the time of the poll tax.
Yeah, and everyone was up there jeering and shouting. It was three English guys, the three of us, and one of the guys who was with from Henley-on-Thames got a very posh accent. And we all
like Binky Braithwaite.
Yeah, very similar actually.
Yeah.
And we all stood up to, like, you know, join in with the jeering, and three Scottish guys in front of us heard us jeering in English accents, turned around, we got lamped for a trouble. So,
yeah,
wallop.
Because you had English accents?
Yeah, basically.
Yeah. That's what it leads, Katie, that's what it leads, doesn't it?
Well, I'm afraid it does, yes. And I think these incidents, as I say, start off small and they work up to be very large. We've had a murder, we've had several other things in Scotland, which I think, although they haven't been primarily about anti-English racism has in the end been the thing which has clinched it, and I think that is very. It's a very worrying tendency. Nobody's suggesting that it's like Albania or Kosovo, but I think it hinges on a delicate balance between being a joke and being a catastrophe.
I mean, certainly around football, that's what's whipped up by the media in both England and Scotland. The anti-English feeling, the anti-Scottish feeling. You know, is this going to be the latest in a long line of spankings that the English have dealt out to the Scottish?
Heather, go on.
Okay, I'm Scottish, obviously, with a name like Heather, and I'm living in London, and I'm faced on a daily basis when I go into the shops and I try and buy my Daily Record and my Herald with my Scottish notes.
Oh, that's not problematic.
Exactly, but excuse me, you will find that it's actually illegal tender, so every day I'm faced with a barrage of abuse from arrogant, cocky, self-assured Englishmen who really wouldn't want to give me the time of day, and all I want to do is buy a newspaper and exchange pleasantries. Good morning, can I have a newspaper, please?
I say, why don't you just go home?
Hang on. What? Go on.
Why don't you just go home?
Why don't you just go home? We're over here, hang on.
So you're telling me it's not about equal opportunities then, is that what you're saying? I actually happen to work for a Scottish company who are very successful, based in London, and one of the reasons that we are so successful working across international accounts is because we're Scottish, because we're level-headed, honest, not arrogant.
What right have you got to?
Go on.
I have two friends, Scottish friends, bend over and Phil McCracken. And they're down from Scotland. Listen, no, I'm telling you.
Can I just introduce this man, actually? Hang on a second, Wayne, let me introduce you. No, be quiet. There was a documentary on television this week, and it's one of those documentaries where they bring people from different spectrums of society together who are poles apart. And they had two rugby league players from the north of England who stayed the week with two gay guys in London. And you were one of the gay guys, were you? Oh, what? Yeah, yeah, that's right. Hey,
who was that?
What do you think of the Scots?
Well, they weren't much different, Scots, pufters. I mean, them two lads. Well.
Can we keep the arguments intelligent,
Right.
please?
Yeah, okay.
Kate Copskett, hang on. Kate Copskett, could you have this man for breakfast with your kippers, please?
I wouldn't have him at all, quite frankly. Not the large pull between us. Now, I think he's very, very typical of a lot of English people, which is just prejudiced against everything.
Them lads who I'm talking about.
Anything that he's not.
Anything that he's
Them lads who I'm talking about, they've come to England, they've slagged us off, and they're both on dole.
Charming, wonderful.
But they're both on dole, I'm paying for them.
You're paying for them?
Yeah.
So you've got a chip on your shoulder then? So it's not only Scots that got a chip on your shoulder, you've got a chip on your shoulder?
No, what's happening is that the average English person is getting fed up with everybody slagging us off. And when we slag anybody else off, everyone gives us grief.
Okay, can I just ask you then, what about football hooliganism abroad? The English really give the Brits an awful
Excuse me.
Look at the World Cup, look at Euro 96.
Yeah,
Explain that to me.
right, I'll explain it to you as long as you want, though. Let's remember...
Don't give me the soul chat, please.
Right, let's not forget there was 50 Category A hooligans arrested in Spain trying to break into France during the World Cup. Let's not forget all the trouble involving the Scottish game took place during Euro 96, started on the Thursday when the Aberdeen casuals came into Camden.
Hang on a minute, Wayne's boyfriend wants to say something, go on. Give a kiss. Go on.
Later, love. What is the problem with these Scottish people here? They've just got an inferiority complex.
Who's got a problem?
All that's happening is...
Yeah, all right, you guys, let's take it over here. You guys, do you have an inferiority complex?
No, I do not have an inferiority complex. Football is an irrelevance.
Listen to them.
Listen, I am a Scotland supporter. My youngest brother is an England supporter. And I love him. I don't hate my youngest brother.
Oh, what a human being you are.
Wait a minute. And I don't...
Walking on the water.
I don't hate the English. I love my brother.
Braithwaite, what do you say?
I don't hate the English either.
Oh.
When you get a charity just like that over there, you get a wee bit edgy, don't you?
Pinky Braithwaite.
I think that by and large they should be proud of their inferiority complex. They've worked at it for 500 years. They're very good at it. They've earned it. They deserve it. You're good at it. You're good at it.
What part of England is a Transvaal anyway, Binky? Binky, is that your name? Binky. You look at Eugene Terra Blanche, you don't need to act like him, do you, man?
You've been on that Tennant's Lager again, haven't you?
Hello.
They're all saying he's got... I don't
Right.
think he's really here.
I think he's really a tosser.
Yes, sir. What about you? What about you? What about you? Could you say something because you seem to be quite intelligent? I was speaking to him earlier. He is. Yeah, go on. So, what do you think of this Binky character who's being terribly patronising? Is that typical of the English attitude?
Well, he's not English to start off with.
South African.
He's African. He's South African. Right, sir. Really, he's a South African.
Binky?
Yes, dear boy.
Are you South African?
Oh, well, I was born there. The point is that what you've got to understand, South Africans actually are 30 or 40 years behind the times. We're still having Mari biscuits and tea, you know. We are carrying the flag. We are Little England in the Transvaal.
Alex Neil from the Scottish National Party. You see, the trouble is, you can be there in your suits, you can be sophisticated politicians with all your nice conference lights and speeches, but when it comes down to it, this sort of antagonism between Scotland and England is what you are drawing on, isn't it?
No, not at all. In fact,
yes,
quite the opposite. What we want to do is build good relationships between Scotland and England. There are incidents, there is no doubt, in Scotland of anti-English behaviour, and the Scottish National Party absolutely deplores that. There are incidents in London, for example, of anti-Scottish behaviour. That's to be deplored as well.
I think
the important thing is that Scotland and England should be good neighbours. And the best way to be good neighbours is when we're equal partners in Europe, and we're not run in our political decisions.
Dougie Brimson, would you miss the Scots if they were to be independent?
The sooner the better. The sooner they are gone, the better. And when they go, can you take all this lot back with you, please?
But people like me,
Katie.
People like me will end up as foreigners in our own country.
Yeah, but half the time I feel like a foreigner in my own country.
But I don't want to feel like...
came from England.
I am English, yes, but I've lived...
Scotland.
All right, there's a gentleman up here. The thing is, I mean, how can there be so much, just before I do go over there, how can there be so much anti-English feeling in Scotland when there are so many English people living there? You just have to go to Edinburgh, all those large swathes of Perthshire. The English are everywhere.
And a lot of them vote for independence, actually. A lot of the English people living in Scotland vote for independence.
Because there is a certain sort of logic to independence, which was more than can be said for devolution in many ways. But I think that there is a sort of, there's a rather weird sort of pulling together of rather disparate groups in Scotland in a sort of coercive anti-English thing, which has never... The Scots have always been very good at squabbling amongst themselves. Everybody knows, you know, the Catholics hate the Protestants, and they all hate the, you know, they all hate
all
the
that
football,
stuff.
all
Yeah,
that
yeah,
stuff.
yeah. But they can concentrate their hatred on the English. That's the point. We heard it from those guys earlier on. You had your hand up. What would you like to say?
Well, I think that in the sense of both nations, they don't, if they want to promote their own countries, they don't do it in a constructive whatsoever. They spend enough time, both England and Scotland, slagging off the other person instead of promoting, here's England, you know, this is what's good about us, or here's Scotland, this is what's good about us. Instead, they spend the other time slagging off the other country and not promoting themselves whatsoever.
Yeah, but what in England, what we say is, here's what's bad about...
Eddie.
Dougie. Yeah, in England, what we have to say is, here's what's bad about England. We're stuck next to Scotland and Wales. That's what we have to say.
You're part of the same thing.
No, we're not. Not according, as far as I'm concerned, we should be. But according to some of these blokes, we're not. They want to distance themselves from the English. But as far as I'm concerned, good bloody riddance.
Heather.
I'd just like to say that when you go on holiday abroad, the Scots don't actually have to slag off the English because they do a big enough and good enough job themselves. The Europeans love the Scottish. They openly and warmly will receive you when you're abroad.
We've got some hands up here. Yes, some English roses.
Yeah, I think there's prejudice from both sides. I was born in Scotland, my parents are English, and I lived in Scotland for 13 years. And all through school, I was thought of as being English, despite the fact that I lived in Scotland, because my parents were English. My accent was always taken the mickey out of, and when I developed a Scottish accent, I moved to England, where I was bullied for my Scottish accent. So there's racism from both sides, there's prejudice from both sides.
There's always going to be bigots wherever you go. Wayne, can I bring you in here?
Bigot?
You
said it, mate.
Come. Would I? No, but please, what is the typical Scot for you?
Tight-fisted. Good looking. Tight-fisted, I mean, like he says, they're just below us anyway. It's all right.
Really? I think the typical English is like... I don't think you've seen Star Trek.
Hang on. Oh no, the wee fellow with the wee man with the beard. Wee man.
England is below Scotland. If you look at the map, you'll find that. So you'll never be above it.
Kate Gobskett.
I think the English as a nation are a bit like the Borg in Star Trek, where these kind of they're these horrible beings.
She said the Borg,
they go through the universe and they assimilate. They suck other types of being into them. They chop off the bits they don't like, and all they want to do is make everybody like them. England's done it all over the world. They knackered India, they knackered Africa, they knackered Scotland, they knackered Wales, they knackered Ireland.
Okay, Star Trek syndrome, so we'll have the last word to Jean-Luc Picard. Go on.
If we were going to chop up the bits we don't like, you lot would have been gone a long time ago, believe me.
That's all we've got time for. Thank you all very much indeed to Pinky and the friends over there, and thank you to Dave Small. Thank you.
I love you too. I'm feeling a wee bit nervous here, but I will press on regardless, given there's an Englishman paying my wages tonight. I will just stay stum. Now, here you go. Here's some comments. Pete from Barrowby says, they should have built Hadrian's Wall higher. It's very difficult for me, Pete, really. Susan from Hena says, I lived in Scotland for 18 years and had to leave because we were bullied by the Scots. Build the wall back up. Sharon from Sutton in Ashfield says, I'm married to a Scottish man and they don't just whinge about the English, they whinge about everything. Paul from West Bridgeford says, you can tell the Scots hate the English because we gave them EastEnders and Coronation Street and they gave us Take the High Road. And Pam from Stoke-on-Trent says, I think the Scots are the bravest men in the world to wear skirts with nothing underneath. There you go, Pam. Pam, I think that was an invitation from the gentleman in the second row. Now, as well as being Scottish, I'm a Capricorn. And according to my birth charts, I'm collected, calm and witty. Which surely proves that we should all believe in astrology. Oh, don't take a vote on it, my God. Right, well, if you're not convinced by me, then perhaps you'll be persuaded by new scientific research which suggests we really are influenced by the stars. We'll be hearing the evidence and the arguments after the break. Thank you for that warm welcome, especially after that last debate. Welcome back. New research published this week seems to prove that for all that we do with ourselves is written in the stars. A study into the lives of thousands of people showed a link between what we do and when we were born. So are we being controlled or just conned? Well, Kevin, you are a high priest of the White Witches in Britain. The high priest of the White Witches
Yes,
in Britain.
indeed, yes.
To what extent do you think we are all controlled by the stars?
I believe that the stars, the moon, the sun has a definite influence on the way we live our everyday lives right from our birth.
What kind of influence?
Particularly the moon. It can influence the lunar cycle, hence the term lunatic, as you've probably heard. But other planetary alignments, Mercury, Venus, all that sort of thing, just daily actions, daily life, and it can actually...
But what difference does it make? I mean, what difference does it make to you? What difference does it make to me?
Well, I'm a Capricorn as well, and if I read my star signs, I'm supposed to be very shy, very insecure, so it depends what book you read. But the stars do dictate, as I say, the lunar influences and everything else.
But do they dictate the person you are? Do they dictate what's going to happen to you in your life?
It's very important how the stars are when you're born. It does influence the ongoing future of people.
You're hedging me a wee bit here, Kevin. How important it is? What impact does it have?
A very strong impact on people's birth and their future.
Right, give me something concrete. I mean, if you were to know my date of birth, which I'm never going to tell you,
right,
could you make any predictions about me, the kind of person that I am, the kind of future that I might have?
I would have to look into this a little bit more. I don't do instant predictions like some of the tarot.
No, but if you had that
yes, if I had everything there, I could
advice.
actually work out star charts for you and tell you what your destiny would end up being.
My destiny?
Your destiny. Your past, present and future, which I also incorporate tarot cards and crystals.
And would these be things that I could change, or would that be it? That would be my destiny, and whatever I did in my life wouldn't really make any difference?
The whole scenario of this is it can give you advice of what to look out for, stepping stones through your life. So you can change certain events, so you can sidetrack, for instance, the silly term walking under a ladder on Friday the 13th. If I said to you, right, don't walk under the ladder, I mean, I would, just if a bucket hit me on the head, but you know, in seriousness, you can divert things if you're forewarned.
Right. So it's not absolutely preordained then?
Not absolutely totally all the way through your life. I mean, if I looked into someone's star sign, I couldn't say, right, you're going to die in the year dot, like, you know, certain things. But you can change the direction you go on.
Right, okay. Terry, what do you think? If we had whatever the planets were doing at the moment that you popped out of your mother's womb, do you think that that has any impact on the person that you are today?
None whatsoever. It's an absolute logical nonsense, and I don't doubt Kevin's sincerity.
but I do think he's deluded, and I think everybody who believes in this claptrap is equally deluded. How can you possibly be governed by what happens millions of miles away in space? It's illogical nonsense.
But why is it that difficult to believe? I mean, we're all biological matter. I mean, is it really such a stretch of comprehension to think that we could be influenced by the elements?
Yes,
we're all part
absolutely.
of this world.
Why on earth should we be? What possible evidence could there be for
the
it?
actual moon influences the menstrual cycle in the female.
No, it doesn't.
And
Excuse me, I don't think so, you know.
Okay, let me finish, please.
Than you do. Menstrual cycle seems to get a bit of an impact. What are you going to say, Wendy?
Actually, the thing I was going to say is really that there is no reason, there is no evidence that astrology works. There is no explanation for a mechanism by which it could work. Now, if it works, then you have to work to find out what the mechanism is. But I mean, the most persuasive study I ever saw about astrology that I thought was really fascinating showed that the more people believed a horoscope was personalized, the higher they tended to rate it in terms of its applicability to them and its accuracy, even though you had several different groups of people given the same description.
Well, I mean, I have to say, I'm a Capricorn, and I have often read a profile of a Capricorn, and I have thought, that is me.
Okay, try this as an experiment.
Has anyone else done that? They've read their profile and they've got, that's
an
me.
experiment for a couple of weeks. Try reading a different sign for a couple of weeks.
No, I've done that. Believe me, I have done that.
But most of these things are so general that you can't actually find patterns that match you. We're great at pattern matching. That's what humans do. And we look for the hits and we forget the misses.
So we're looking for what we want and we dismiss the stuff that we don't want.
Yes.
What about if we did the birth signs of birth chart of all of the people in Nagasaki in 1945 when the nuclear bomb went off? Would it suddenly show that they all stopped at the same time and died?
Would it? Would it?
Stretching credibility.
I mean, there's 2 points we're looking at here. One, not some of the garbage that comes out in the national press. We could read 10 different newspapers and they all say different things about Capricorn or Aquarius or
But
anything.
he's not talking about that. He's talking about doing the birth charts of people who have all died in a cataclysmic event.
Yeah.
Should that have been predicted?
If they'd gone to a seer or a reader or an astrologist, yes, it would have been. Not every individual person.
Okay. The thing is, it can't speak indefinite. It cannot speak. It's built on a falsehood. Let's get the facts right. It is based in religion, the old religion. This man, by his own confession, is a witch. Now, a witch is a witch. No, there is no differential. A witch is a witch. There is no colour code. A witch is a witch.
The Christian
record
on witches is Christian.
And their father is the devil, and he is the father of lies. So it's all built on falseness. This is why they can't give definites like this man has.
Can I take it you're coming from a Christian perspective?
That's right.
Well, listen, you've got one set of beliefs, he's got his set of beliefs. Who says that yours are any better than his?
Excuse me, if you're...
But they can't come up with definites. It's built on a falseness, and it's all put into
Can you come up with definites as a
Christian?
Christian?
The ring of Satan.
Can you come up with definites?
The ring of Satan.
Of course it is.
Of course
it's
not.
pentagram.
That represents earth, air, fire, water, the spirit.
Whatever.
Okay,
You and I know the truth.
Never the twain are going to meet here. Vince, can I come to you? Now, you are a psychologist. You specialise in consumer studies. Not particularly predisposed to astrology, am I right in saying?
Not particularly, no.
But you carried out a piece of research to see if there was a link between astrology and consumer behaviour.
Yeah.
And you were surprised by the results.
I was, but first of all, before and I will answer that, can I just say about the explanation? Just because you can't explain a phenomenon doesn't mean it doesn't exist. When Newton first invented and described the laws of gravity, he couldn't explain them either. In fact, they still haven't been explained. It doesn't mean to say that they don't exist.
Okay, so you're saying that
Anyway.
maybe our level of knowledge is not yet that advanced to make those
Absolutely,
explanations,
absolutely.
but that doesn't mean it's not true.
No.
Okay, let's get on to your research.
Yeah, well, we looked at nearly 30,000 people, and what we found, we looked at their smoking, drinking, and leisure pursuits. We found that Arians tend to smoke more, Geminians tend to drink more, Scorpios drink less, Virgoans do less gardening, they do less DIY, they do watch less TV, and Aquarians do more DIY. Now,
statistics, damned lies, and statistics is what kind of comes to mind here.
It may be, and any piece of research needs to be assessed for that methodological rigour. Ours has been refereed, it's peer-reviewed, it's out there for people to see, and I'm quite happy to stand by the results and say that there were some significant differences which we couldn't find any other explanation for, other than to say there was some effect which was related to your star sign.
Wendy, you've got a marvellous expression of distaste here. Is it disbelief
No,
or what is it?
I haven't seen the research, and I'm not a statistician. The thing I'm curious about is with something like that, it's so hard to control for all the demographic variables. I mean, who knows? Maybe people born in August do less gardening because the first season they experience is winter. I mean, I don't know. But there are a lot of variables to control for, and I'm sure it's a very difficult study to examine.
You haven't exactly established a cause and effect here, have you?
No, we haven't. We've seen some significant variations in these things, which we're looking for explanations for, and one of them, which neatly fits some of them, is looking for astrology, people's personality signs.
Has it changed your view on astrology?
It has. I went from complete skeptic to thinking there may be something in this that I can't completely discount it.
Kay, can I make a point here? It isn't the first time that research has been done in astrology. There was a gentleman called Michel Gauquelin in France who did research based on people's career, looking at their actual birth charts rather than just looking at their sun signs. And he started off from a skeptical point of view and ended up accidentally proving that the time and the month that you were born in can actually influence the type of career that you're likely to choose. I think to divide everybody into 12 and say one star sign is likely to do more DIY and one star sign is likely to do more gardening is much too general for an astrologer to accept. But we do accept the Gauquelin research, which talks...
What about prediction? Samantha, you believe in...
Gauquelin's data was just recently reanalyzed.
Well, there's no way that we can go over data here because we don't have it in front of us.
No, I'm just saying it didn't. When it was reanalyzed, the conclusion did not hold up.
Okay,
I agree with that. I've read it
Right,
too.
we'll put that one to bed. Samantha, you actually believe that you can predict.
I can predict
Events.
the likely turn of events, yes.
Right.
By using astrology, not just the basic signs, but for doing what we call casting a chart for a particular moment in time. You've seen those diagrams.
So have you made any successful predictions?
Yeah, there's a lot that are personal, but there's one I feel very sad about. The time, the election before last, when I was just casually, out of interest, trying to see which of the parties were going to get in, and I noticed in a particular area of the chart every sign of extraordinary explosives and terrorist activity, and I didn't know what to do, because what does an astrologer do when so many people don't take astrology seriously? And I really should have got to the head of the terrorists.
There was terrorist activity at that time, there were bombs.
I had a fax sent to the Home Secretary, and I gave the timing for when I thought the explosions would take place. Of course, he didn't take any notice of me whatsoever, and on election day, up went parts of Westminster.
So you feel that you could have prevented that if only people had listened to you?
Yeah, it's not for me. It would have saved a few lives, lots of money and some buildings.
Anyone buy that?
Yes. I think 1 in 10 people do have a spiritual gift that they can use, and most of the audience here at some point...
But we're talking about things being written in the stars, aren't we? What about this book up here? What do you think?
Well, I mean, I think in terms of people wanting to be taken seriously, but it doesn't really... The whole field of astrology has not been done any favours by the way it's, portrayed in the media. It's almost kind of like a parody. I mean, like Mystic Meg off the National Lottery. Anyone believe that at all? On the one hand, 14 million to 1 chance of winning the lottery, but on the other hand, you'll win the lottery if you're wearing a red jumper at the time.
Would you ever take any notice of something that you read in an astrological chart?
No.
No, you wouldn't. Well, Jenny and David, let me come over to you. You are customers, clients or whatever of Samantha.
Yes.
Yeah.
Correct.
Why did you go to consult her?
Well, I first went to see Sam when I met David, and I'm a psychic medium, and David is a doctor of science, and there's a whole gap and a whole difference of our lifestyles and what I thought we believed in at the time, and I thought, aha, I got his birth chart, and the second time of meeting him, and went to see Sam, and said, do you think that we're going to be compatible? Actually, I was in lust with this man. I don't think I was in love with him at the time. And I said, have a look at his chart, compare the charts. And she said, well, you've got this compatibility. I don't know anything about the planets. I'm not an astrologer. But she compared both our charts, and she said, you've got a good workable relationship if you can cope with his moods. He is a moody man. All this.
Do you need it's true? But do you need somebody else to tell you that? I mean, you're a grown woman. Are you not just abdicating responsibility for your decisions?
No, but I think you should have as much information as you can when you're going to enter a relationship with people that are so far opposite as we happen to appear. And I went to her for advice, not if I disagreed with it. I would listen to my own self, my own conscience.
I feel that she's not talking a load of cobblers. I mean, you can quote advice from any number of people.
It's been proved right. He is very moody. Her advice on how I could cope with this and deal with
So
it
there you go,
over a
that's it,
period
it's
of
proven.
time.
What do you think?
I was saying that everybody, before they get married, should go and see this lady here and say, what's his mood's like? If he's moody, you don't marry him. I'm a moody old bugger. But Sarah doesn't dare say, I'm not marrying you because you're moody. That's the cobblers.
No, that isn't what she said. That isn't what she
said. Nobody has to do. Good if you went to an astrologer, actually.
Yeah, can I ask you, what if Samantha had said, what if you had moved on from your lustful phase and you thought, no, this is the guy, I'm pretty sure this is the guy I want to marry, and who could ever be 100% sure when you decide to get married? And you go to Samantha and she says no. What would you have done?
I wouldn't do that.
Well, okay, all right. That you gave indications that... Hang on. Just hang on a minute, Alec. I'll come over to you. I'll just come over to you in just a second. That you made indications that this was not the right man. Okay, now if you're going to give any advice at all...
If there was a terrific clash. If I'd have wanted him, I'd have had him. And I did.
So you would have ignored her advice?
Because she has free will. It's free will.
I hope she wasn't expensive. You know, if you're going to... I mean, basically what you're doing there is if you like the advice, you'll take it. If you don't like the advice, you won't take it.
Isn't that what any advice is about, though? Isn't that what any advice is about? I look at astrology. I've had several readings from Samantha I have interest, and I've been quite impressed with the accuracy of them. Now, I regard astrology and lots of other sort of readings as kind of having a weather forecast. Right?
What kind of things
you
does she
do
tell
with
you?
that information is up to you, right? What you do with the information that you're given is up to you. You have responsibility, you have free will to go your own way, but to get all the advice that you can get on a particular subject, I think is very useful.
Well, give me concretes. What sort of things would she say to you that you've been impressed with?
Okay, for instance, I was going through several months of quite a difficult time when I was knocking on a lot of doors that weren't opening, and I had a reading at about that time, and I was told that at a certain period of time that it would all open up and everything would come right. A particular type of job was described to me, and that job came about at the time, and it was very much as described, and it's very much a sort of unique job within my industry.
Right.
And it happened pretty much on cue almost to the week.
Right, and do you remember how many jobs you were offered in that day?
Yeah, I was offered about 2 jobs definite and 2 jobs almost within 2 days.
All right, okay, the Taurus the Bull joke's been done, by the way. But, I mean, you know, thanks for having another stab at it there. Yeah.
And I didn't believe in it. I was drawn into it against my will. I was told that I was going to change my career, board a plane, go to an island, beginning with S. It was in the 60s, Spain was popular. I was frightened of flying. I said, no way am I going to do this. And 6 months later I applied for a job in Shetland, got it, and flew up to Shetland on my own.
But at the end of the
day...
as far as you're concerned, that means that astrology is valid.
Yes.
That the stars predicted...
I was told this was going to happen. I didn't go out looking for it.
Now this is your daughter going, whoof, next to you. Why are you doing that?
It's a load of twaddle, right? This has come right once in what? How many years? Hang on, let me talk. 21 years this has come right once, right?
That's quite a good hit rate.
So she goes to the news agents every Sunday. She picks up one paper and she fills it with every Sunday magazine going. Because they've got different star signs in, right?
So she's a tea leaf as well. I predict you're going to get done very soon.
Change the news agent. You make your own.
Hang on.
Oh, no.
Hang on.
You cast your own future. It says you're going to get a job. If you sit at home on the dole all day, a job is not going to knock your door. You have to go out and find it. It's the same as love. Love is not going to knock your door. You have to go down and you have to find it. You have to mix with people. If you're sitting at home all day, it's not going to knock at your door. Do you know what I'm saying?
So how much notice do you think your mum takes of these...
Your best advantage.
Sorry?
You have to use the stars to your advantage.
No, what do you mean by that?
Because if the stars, for example, if they said, oh, this and that's going to happen, and if, like she said, if you sit at home, it's not going to happen, but if you think that it is and you use it to your advantage, then maybe it can work for you.
Yeah, you think it's going to happen, so you go out and you mix, hoping it's going to happen.
Would it be any different if the council you went to didn't use astrology and simply sat there and gave you the same advice? Like, you know, maybe if you want to find a job, maybe you should keep knocking on doors and sooner or later one of them will open. Why do you need astrology to give that piece of advice?
Because astrology can tell you particular periods in a year when you're going to have a much better chance of finding
finding the
So the
career
rest
you
of the time
want.
you
don't bother to do anything.
Sitting at home the rest of the time is not really a good idea.
Okay, all right, Alex, what are you saying? Hang on, okay.
Already said that they're not going to tell you the truth. We've heard from two of them now said that they will not give definite. They won't say that this is definitely going to happen. They're only going to give a variable. That they will not tell you the truth.
But hang on, just a second, not too much. They're accepting that. What they are saying is that they get certain guidance, certain advice from the stars, which they then choose to use in a way that they see fit. Well, yes, so what's wrong with that?
But the person, the reader is pandering to their insecurities. They're pandering to them. They receive money for it. They get a payment for it. They leave them with more questions than they've got answers. So they're bound to come back again. They're not going to give them definite exactly what's going to happen.
Nonsense.
Rubbish!
That's the giant speaking.
Nobody forces people to go to see astrologers.
I didn't say she forced you, but she pandered to it. She already said.
Pander to me.
She already said if it had been a no, she wouldn't have told you.
I didn't say that at all.
Well, you did get a hedge on it.
There's a few million out there who said you did. You said quite clearly that you wouldn't have told her no,
But
it's
Jenny,
not
you
him.
clearly wanted to hear David is a man for you. And that's what you got.
Did want to hear.
How much did you pay for that?
I'm not telling you.
Why?
Well, that's personal.
Special rates, because I like her.
How much you charge?
Full hour, £35.
£35.
That's including all the work and the calculations I've done, which can take several hours.
Right, okay, so you're a bargain.
I think I'm a bargain, yeah.
Yes,
Well, I think she's a bargain as well.
And fill you with a load of jargon and charge you for it. If you're going to believe it, you're going to pay for it. If they're going to tell you good things, you're going to go back again. So say she's charging £35 what for an hour, you tell her loads of good things, that girl goes home quite happy, she tells a friend, oh, she's told me I'm going to get a job, I'm going to meet the man of my dreams, oh, I'll go and see this woman, she's so good.
Yeah, but
she's raking in money. I can sit there all day long and tell people happy things, raking in the money all the time.
But listen, you're not giving people a lot of credit, are you? I mean, you're casting people as absolute dolts that are going to go along and believe anything that they're told.
Yeah, but they do, though. If you're told something happy and you're hoping it's going to work, you're going to tell other people. They're going to go. They're going to hope it's going to work.
Okay, listen, hang on just a tick. Hang on just a tick. In a way that we can't particularly explain here, but Kevin, you think that the planetary activity can be called upon to help people
We believe in the
as we go
forces
through
of
life.
nature
Okay,
in
right.
good ways.
Let's talk specifically about your fertility.
Fertility spells at St Abbas, yeah.
Right. So this is for couples who are having problems conceiving.
Conceiving, yeah.
Yeah, so you take them up to a thing that we might be able to see on our screen any minute now, which is the big chalk drawing there.
It's got a 20-foot willy.
It's got a 20-foot willy, good for him. Not even a kilt on him, it's absolutely fabulous.
We don't take people onto the figure itself. We actually perform positive thought rituals for them to try and enhance the bad luck they're having, and it does actually work. No, we let the couples give them each other one. But,
it's very democratic, right, okay.
It's all left to the
And there's
couple.
got to be a full moon.
A full moon.
Why
we
is there a
believe
full
it's
moon?
controlling the influences inside a person's body.
Why are you giggling here? Why are you giggling?
Well, let's not probably sit in the pub when, you know. It's cheaper than Viagra, I tell you. We charge a £5, not 35 quid, you know.
And what are your results?
Very good, as you can actually... It's nothing to do with Satan.
Hang on.
We believe in God and the goddess, we don't believe in...
Let's not get into this. But listen, one of the accusations that's been thrown at astrologists within this debate is that you are taking advantage of vulnerable people. Surely there can be no more vulnerable people than people who are trying to have a child and failing. And you take them up to a big chalk drawing, there's a full moon in the sky, go at it out on the 20-foot willy.
Okay, you explain to me how we have documented results, how they've conceived when they've been trying for 6 years. Whether it's the chalk willy that works or whether it's the husband or whatever, you know.
There are many stories of women conceiving when they didn't particularly expect to do so.
But at the end of the day, if you can't have children and a man comes along in a big cloak and says, you go at it like rabbits, you're going to have a baby, they're going to go at it like rabbits. If they can't have a baby, they're going to think...
You go at it like rabbits?
My sex life's my own business at the end of the day.
Try the 21-foot willy on St Abbas.
Well, listen, I think you put it better than I ever could. Thank you very much. And we'll leave you all to do what you want to do tonight, like rabbits or otherwise. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. We didn't need to forecast. We could guarantee lots of calls from you. Mr. Hutchins from Cannock. My wife must be a witch because she keeps telling me what I'm doing next week. Alice from... It's a joke. Alice from Aston. People who believe in astrology influencing what they do must lead very sad, empty lives. Karen from Cheltenham, how come twins can be completely different people with completely different personalities if they're both born on the same day at the same time? And Pete from Chaplash, I went to see an astrologist the other day. The notice on the door said closed due to unforeseen circumstances. That's it from us. See you soon. Bye-bye.